According to the Bridges Business Consultancy, 48% of strategic plans are still failing year after year. Now that number has gone up over the last 4 years, but we have some work to do. Let me tell you how this plays out. I was working with 2 companies back in 2020. Both companies had a fantastic strategy, a plan. They had the clear goals, they were smart, they had the KPIs, they had the beautiful deck, their team was bought in, they rolled the strategic plan out. A year later, only one of them was actually hitting their objectives. The other one had no idea what was happening. The difference, it wasn't their strategy. It was something completely different. And in today's video, I'm going to share that one thing, well, there's a few things that business owners and CEOs forget about when they're doing their strategic planning. And I'm going to share the framework that successful CEOs use in order to achieve the objectives on their plan. So let me tell you how a traditional strategic business planning session goes. The CEOs sit with their leadership team. They set these big, ambitious goals. They create detailed action plans. Everyone nods and agrees, and they leave the room feeling super energized. And then nothing happens. Why? Because they have fallen into what I call the planning paradox. This is the false belief that a perfect plan leads to perfect execution. But here's what's fascinating, and I see this repeatedly across my work with CEOs. The problem isn't the plan itself. It's that the planning process doesn't take into consideration 3 critical execution drivers. I'm going to go through these drivers with you right now. Number 1 is the hidden power dynamics. What else is influencing the success of your plan? Let me give you a quick example of hidden power dynamics. I recently worked with a CEO who couldn't figure out why his digital transformation kept stalling. It turns out a highly respected senior engineer, not even in management, was quietly influencing the whole tech team's attitude towards the change. It's important to identify who those influencers are in your company. The second thing to consider is, where does the resistance come from? This often shows up as passive compliance. So people are saying yes, but then finding reasons why things can't move forward. I'll give you another example. A manufacturing company, they had a strategic plan to automate their production line, and it looked perfect on paper. But the unexpected resistance came from their star sales team. And when they dug a little bit deeper, it turned out that the sales guys had built 20-year relationships with these clients by promising handcrafted quality. They knew that automation was going to destroy their most powerful selling point. Once they understood this, they completely reframed the automation narrative to protect the client's relationship. So they reframed it to say it wasn't automation exactly, but they were going to make it more efficient, and they were going to make it quicker to get it into the customer's hands faster. So there's different ways of positioning it in order for the salespeople to buy in to that particular aspect of the strategy. Which team members need to be on board? This goes back to my influencer comment. Sometimes it's not the obvious leaders. It could be key respected veterans in the company who have loud voices. One of my clients learned this the hard way. They had decided that they were going to roll out a new customer service initiative. Everything was great. The managers all agreed that this is what they were going to do. They rolled it out to their teams. But what they didn't realize that there was a particular seasoned veteran on the team who used to train new hires, the people that came on board. She hadn't bought into the changes. She didn't understand them. She didn't agree with them. And so she kept training people on the old ways because that's what had worked for her and had worked for the company in the past, not realizing that this was going to be causing issues. When the line managers found out that this was happening, they went back to her, included her into the process, helped her see what the benefits were of this new change, and then that's when the strategy was smooth sailing after that. So that's hidden power dynamics. You really have to see who and what is influencing the plan beyond the people that were in the room when the plan was created. The second piece is operational reality. So what's happening inside the company as you're rolling this new strategy out? One of the first things you have to ask is, what's the real capacity for change here? Most organizations are running at 90% capacity. New initiatives compete with existing priorities for limited time and resources. So picture this. A software company had approved 5 critical projects for Q1. But when we mapped it all out and saw that the engineers were already spending 45 hours a week on existing initiatives and projects that were already on the go, they had no capacity for anything else. They had maybe capacity for one more project that they could do, assuming that others fell off, but not 5. This simple capacity analysis was such an eye-opener for the leadership team. The next thing to think about is, where are the bottlenecks in your business? Now, this is not necessarily process bottlenecks, but it could also be decision bottlenecks. One marketing agency I was working with thought that their bottleneck was related to execution. They thought that their people weren't able to execute fast enough, but it turned out the real bottleneck was the review process. Every piece of content needed to be reviewed by 4 people, and it was just creating this backlog that was unsustainable. The fanciest of project management tools are not going to fix an approval bottleneck issue, unfortunately. So being able to dig deeper and finding out where things are stalling is hugely beneficial. The third thing that a lot of leadership teams overlook is what other initiatives are on the go at the moment. In the zeal to get things going and to explore the next frontier, you forget about the fact that there's a business that's happening in the moment. Every department has their own things that they're working on, and it's business as usual stuff, but you have to take those into consideration. This one financial services firm that I was working with had introduced a new CRM into their business. And on the strategic plan, the launch date was Q4 of that year. Q4 meant that the end of the year was coming up and the sales team was scrambling to hit their targets. Do you think any one of them would have cared at all about putting in information into a CRM or going to the training sessions or sitting through a new change management process around how they log their deals and activity? Of course not. Launching that project in Q4 would have been a disaster for the company. And so it was important to go back and revise their timelines. The third thing that is really important to consider in your strategic planning process to ensure proper execution is cultural readiness. And what this means is, are your people ready for a new strategy? You have to really ask yourself honestly, is your team truly aligned or are they just nodding along? True alignment isn't when people are excited in the room when you're creating that strategy and the plan or when you're talking about it in a town hall. True alignment happens when you see whether people are defending and acting on that plan when you're not in the room. The second piece is, do people feel safe raising concerns? It's one thing to go ahead and plan all this stuff, but if you don't open the floor for people who are actually going to be doing the work to raise their hands and raise concerns, that's going to be a problem. A company that I worked with said that they wanted their employees to speak up and voice concerns and challenge leadership. But when employees actually did that, I found out when I was speaking with them in confidence that they said that the CEO, if the CEO didn't agree with them, they would be effectively blacklisted or labeled as a whiner or a complainer, and worse, they would be excluded from future planning meetings because they didn't want dissension. They didn't want anyone to question authority. They just wanted to tell people what to do. You can imagine that that was a pretty tough conversation for me to have with the CEO, but if he wanted strategy to be executed well, he needed to understand that this was an issue in the organization. And the last thing that you have to consider is, what is the history of change initiatives in the company? There is such a thing as change fatigue. When you keep introducing more and more change, there is a danger of turning people off entirely, and worse, leading to burnout or quiet quitting or full-on quitting. Now, you might be thinking, great, more problems for me to worry about. But here's the good news. Once you understand these hidden drivers, they become more predictable and easier to manage. And I'm going to show you how. The most successful CEOs I know use what I call the reality first planning framework. Let's go through that right now together. Step 1, start with truth finding. So have private conversations with your team members. What keeps them up at night? Ask them, what do you think is going to get in our way? What aren't we talking about? Use your team's knowledge and wisdom to inform your strategic plan's execution. The second thing is, have team brainstorming sessions. Have reality checks with frontline staff. These are the people that are in the trenches that are working to produce the product or service that you provide to your customers. They know what's happening and they know the problems that are going to be incurred before you have even ever thought of them. Step 2, test for readiness. Have team alignment discussions. Use scenario planning to test how different team members will handle specific challenges. Look at workload analysis, so map out all of your current projects and commitments before adding any new ones. And look at how past change efforts have worked with the company. What worked, what didn't work. Step 3 is building the bridge. You have to connect the strategy to the daily work. Like, people need to see how they can contribute to that strategy on a day-to-day basis. That's most important. Create feedback loops. Have regular check-ins that focus on obstacles and not just progress reports. Like, you want to know why things aren't working so you can fix them. Design accountability systems. Have a system where people can be held accountable and where rewards and consequences are clear, measurable, and understood by everybody. So that's it. Those are the 3 steps that you need to work with. If you want to ensure that your 2025 plan actually delivers results, then go ahead and book a call. The link is in the description below, and we'll see if it's the right fit for you to work with me. Now over to you. I would love to hear what your roadblocks have been to fully executing a strategy, or if you have some success stories of how you were able to turn your strategic plan into an execution plan in a way that worked for everybody in your organization and delivered results. I'd love to hear about those too. Put your comments down below and share them with the rest of us. I'll be back in the next video. Take care.